I'm so excited to chat with Dr. Caroline Addington today on the Awaken Feminine podcast. Dr. Caroline is a former engineer and neuroscientist turned business mystic. She's obsessed with thinking differently about money, consumerism, community, and creativity in the modern age. She specializes in helping entrepreneurs reimagine their relationship with money and stepping into their sacred money work. And I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us today. She's joining me all the way from Virginia in the USA. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. Caroline and I met, maybe a few weeks ago, and we just connected so well. And I'm like so excited for what we're going to be talking about. But before we dive into our conversation, can you please share with us, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
Ooh, what a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is feeling comfortable in our bodies and our skins and in who we are, not just like the meat suit of who we are, but like all of the flaws and imperfections that, maybe the outside world has told us are flaws, being in a state of deep love and reverence for all those little pockets as well. Because I know for the longest time when I was thinking about like my own empowerment journey and my own awakened feminine journey, I felt like I needed to be someone other than who I was in order to be an empowered, awakened woman. Yeah. And the longer that lifelong journey keeps unfolding, the less it feels like it needs to be anyone other than who we are in this red hot minute, like funky, weird quirks. And I know before we hit record, we were talking about like, emailing back and forth, like, delayed emails and, whatever, and like being busy and letting things, take their divine time. And I think that it's like all of that stuff, embracing and loving and celebrating all of that stuff, to me feels like the awakened feminine.
That's so beautiful, because I think we live in a world where we're always striving to be this person that we've kind of imagined in our head, when really we just need to be who we are. And that's such a beautiful definition. Thank you. I had, the goosebumps were going.
Well, it's like, it's kind of an act of rebellion in and of itself, because so much of the cultural story about who a woman should be and what the feminine should be is exactly that. It's this should box, and the celebration of whoever. Can I curse on this podcast?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Whoever the fuck we are is like this like beautiful rebellion in its own way, where it's like, take your should box and put it somewhere where I don't have to see it, because I'm not going to play with that game.
Yeah. I love it. And cursing is always welcome on the podcast, because it just, is so true, like that authenticity when you curse, right?
100%.
Caroline, before we dive into the topic that we're going to talk about today, I would love for you to share with us a little bit about your journey, just quickly, like going from neuroscientist, engineer, to being a business mystic. Is like, here you've got, it's very scientific based, and then you're like, what, business mystic? That's like completely different. Oh, yeah. How did that kind of come about for you?
Yeah. So for those who are into human design, I'm a manifesting generator. So I have learned to embrace the pivot fully. And that's like a part of the manifesting generator energy design. But that shift started because my body was just completely burnt out and depleted, and giving me every signal under the sun that this was not the right path for me anymore. There was a time when being in the world of science was fun and fulfilling for me. I love problem solving and thinking about things and asking questions and learning, and it scratched that itch. But so many things in our lives can come and go, and they have at least, some, in my experience, there's an expiration date for stuff. And when something expires, letting it go, being able to let it go and embrace whatever's coming next is an art. and it's challenging. But the like big picture journey from scientist to business mystic was that reckoning and that realization that like, yeah, this is expired. It doesn't feel true for me anymore. My body was like just absolutely burnt out and exhausted. And then there was this like midway point where I built up a successful business in personal branding and marketing, and was able to actually take a lot of the like, understanding of neuroscience and understanding of how the brain works and ability to like read scientific literature and apply that to everything I've done since, which is really handy, as you could imagine, and helpful. So I was seeing the neuroscience and the psychology behind marketing and built a successful marketing and personal branding company around that. But as a byproduct of that, continuing to go deeper with that journey and that question and line of questioning, I was like, wait a second, consumerism is like a whole elephant in the room that we're like not talking about, that is really interesting and funky and has a huge influence on how we experience marketing and money and branding and all of these things. And that's led me to where I am today, is this interplay between all of those things. And I call myself a business mystic because that's the best term I can come up with to describe what I do. Because I think that like building a business is its own mystic path if we choose for it to be. The path of the mystic is really about stepping into the unknown over and over again and figuring out our own way back to the divine, our own journey, our own unique human path back to source, universe, whatever anyone wants to call it, and God, whatever word feels good for someone. And business can be a vehicle for that when we play with it that way. So that's the best word that I have to describe what I do. And that's like the high level journey.
Yeah, I love it. I love everything that you've just, talked about. Expiration date. I think so many of us, me as well, we kind of don't understand that there is an expiration date for things. And yet, so we just hold on and we just stay in the same job, stay in the same relationships or whatever it is, not understanding that there is an expiration date. I mean, not everything does, but when you feel that it's time to leave, we don't want to do it because it's so safe. Yet your body, like for yourself, where you were just completely burnt out, is like, come on, Caroline, we need to stop doing this. Come on. Can we just stop doing this? And you just had to stop. So I love how you call it expiration date, because I think it helps people kind of go, recognize that maybe I'm at the expiration date of whatever it is that I need to leave. So I love that. And the business mystic, yes, I love that, because it is when you go into business is always an unknown. Every step of the way is an unknown. You just kind of have to just keep stepping and keep moving forward and find out what the unknown is. Yeah. I love it. And which is a great segue to consumerism and our relationship with money, which is what we want to talk about today.
Woo!
Yeah. Let's can you expand a bit more about consumerism? I don't know if many people know what it actually even means. So if you don't mind expanding into that, and then we can talk a bit more about how that can affect our relationship with money, or how our spending habits ties in with valuing money. Yeah, and all that. Yeah.
100%. I can geek out on this. I will say a quick preface before diving into it, because consumerism is kind of like any of these other big systemic structures where we can see it and then, if it's maybe the first time we're seeing it, then it can feel like, oh my gosh, this is everywhere. What do I do? Get it away from me, kind of like, the patriarchy or systemic racism or extractive capitalism, like any of these big systemic structures that are constrictive. I call them creative constraints. They're putting creative constraints on our, world.
Yeah.
But entering into learning about and working with any of these systems, it's so huge right out of the gate to recognize that we are inherently way more powerful than the hold that they can have over us, right? So while the system itself may be bigger than us, it's not more powerful than our own sovereignty, right? So like, a lot of times when I teach about releasing consumerism, I'm like, it's not that you're bebopping away to the ninth dimension where consumerism isn't a thing anymore. You're not releasing it in that sense where it's like not a part of your reality. It's releasing the power that it has over our decision-making process, over our sense of self, over how we move and live and be, and recognizing that we can live in a world that has consumerism, has patriarchy, has racism. Yes, of course, we want to do the work to change all of that. But, it's accepting that this is the state of the world right now, and releasing consumerism looks like living sovereign within a world that has consumerism. So big preface before we dive into it so that because I used to just dive straight into it. And then I was like, oh shit, like people are probably listening on the other side of this podcast, like, oh my God, what do I do? This is everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. So consumerism, if you just Google it, you get like a super dry answer, like centering the consumer in business decisions, but it actually has a much more intimate experience than that. And I define it as this cultural conditioning and cultural programming to always be looking for something to do about our discomfort. And going back to the neuroscience and the psychology of marketing has evolved over the last 70 years. And especially with the internet coming on board, it's gotten really intimate. Marketing's gotten really intimate, and it catches us in these moments of big discomfort. And the way that it works is it says, hey, it shines a light on that discomfort and says, hey, you're super uncomfortable about this. And we're like, yeah, we are. But then it immediately says, and don't you want to feel really good about it? And here's the buy now button so that you can do something about that and trick your brain into thinking that you've solved this problem. Yeah. And through decades and decades of engaging with the world and brands and companies and messaging and marketing this way, it's conditioned us to think that as soon as we feel discomfort, we then need to seek out something that will, fix it, basically, instead of being able to just be present with it. And so this, you can really obviously think of examples with how this translates to our relationship with money and how we work with money in the world. Like I was just saying, the buy now button is like a super obvious example, but I also like to shine a light on the fact that this is in everything. It's in, the choices that we make about the food that we eat, or the self-care that we do or do not give to ourselves, the, being in maybe an uncomfortable conversation with someone and wanting them to validate us and wanting to make them feel good about this uncomfortable moment, and as a way to try and quote unquote fix that discomfort. Or even the sneakiest one that gets everybody in the world of spirituality and self-development is, I'm feeling discomfort, so let me go journal about it and shift my limiting beliefs about it and do all my witchy shit about it, instead of just actually being at peace with the discomfort itself. And all of this, being able to release that need to immediately act on discomfort, frees us up to make all of our decisions, but especially money decisions from a place of sovereignty and clearness.
Wow.
I know that was a lot. I get really excited and then I just like verbal.
No, I love it. I love it because it's not something that is talked about enough, I think, because it's just, I don't even know what the word I want to use, like kind of infiltrated into your life without you being aware of it. It's always there. I mean, just look at Facebook or YouTube. I mean, my phone's always listening to what I'm saying. I might just say something and then the next minute I'm on YouTube and like all these videos start popping up. I'm like, I didn't even Google it. Or, you Google something and then all the ads on Instagram is for that product or similar products. It's just always in your face. And because we never think we're good enough or enough, so then we're like, oh, I need that to fix me because that's what's going to help. And all this bombardment that, you kind of realize that there, but then you get caught in the web, I guess. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful metaphor, is like, the web, 100% like the spider's web, where it's like he gets stuck.
Yeah. And internet web. Like, all these metaphors. Yeah. So when I guess not even just when you work with clients, but when you work with clients and, see it around you, how did that shift your, how did you realize that was like happening, and how did you shift it so that you changed your relationship with money? Because I know like quite a few friends of mine where they're just always buying stuff. They've got a wardrobe full of clothes and yet they continue to buy more and buy more and buy more because they're not feeling they're fulfilled. But they don't know that at the same time.
Right. Well, yeah, that's such a great question. So like within my own experience, it wasn't, I love that you give the illustration of clothes, because for everyone, it can show up differently. And it can be so easy to be like, oh no, I know that like material things don't solve our problems. I don't buy a bunch of clothes, or I don't like go and get the newest iPhone, or I don't like, want a new car and all these things. But my experience was self-development experiences and like coaching. Yeah. For anyone listening on the podcast, just pointing like, same.
That's me too.
Yeah. And so many people who resonate with the way that I teach about money are in that same boat, where it's like, but it's the same thing. We've just, at least in my experience, I had convinced myself that it was somehow different. And I won't say it wasn't, because it was always leading me in a direction that was bringing me closer back home to who I am, the awakened feminine, to go back to the beginning. But so many of those like courses and coaching experiences and masterminds and everything were coming from an energy and an intention of, I'm in discomfort and I need to do something about it. I need to solve this problem. I need to work with this coach. And it's what I would do that I think is like really interesting, that might resonate with people, is I would feel all of that discomfort and like, search for a coach who teaches on XYZ kind of thing. And then like, read all about what they have on offer and all this stuff. And then I knew, like intellectually, I was like, okay, I don't want to buy it from like a frantic intention. So I'm going to have this like buying ritual where I like sit, and in the moment that I buy it, I'm going to have like a clear intention. The whole reason that I was buying it was to try and escape this discomfort. And it's like, that was the real intention that was driving the action, despite what my like conscious mind was trying to do. So yeah, so that was the biggest thing for me. And what really shifted that, to go back to your question, was the recognition. I had invested in a mastermind that was the largest investment that I made. And I was like, this is the same shit. And this human that I invested to work with doesn't know me better than I know me. No one knows me better than I know me. What? Why am I doing this? I think I had to get to the end of the rope for myself, like we often do.
Yeah.
You have to get to our own breaking point to be like, this is not it. This is not the vibe. This is not actually going to fix anything, So that was the shifting point for me. And it was kind of an organic process from there where it was like, all right, well, if this isn't the vibe and isn't the way, then what is? And it opened up this line of questioning that helped me see consumerism. And as soon as we can see it and name it, which, we were talking about earlier, like this is what it is. As soon as we see that and give it a name, it changes everything, because once you can name it, then you actually have a choice, right? You're not like wandering around the fog blind. You have a choice where you're like, okay, I can choose to do this, but I'm doing it with choice. I'm doing it with the full awareness that this consumerism thing, this trying to escape the discomfort is what's going on. And I'm still going to choose it because maybe I'm not quite ready to feel all of this discomfort, and that's okay. But there's a choice point, and that changes everything. Because having choice in the matter, slowly over time, we can just, choose more and more the choice that is aligned with our sovereignty and our clearness. And it's a process, and it's a process. It takes time. And I'm like, yep, nope. I'm going to choose right now to binge some Netflix. Like that's my choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm going to choose right now to do whatever. But having sovereignty in it is huge.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you've said, because a lot of times, like you're saying, we just walk around not actually even realizing we're doing or we're buying things that we don't need. It's because it's just normal. Everyone says a BMW is great. So, oh yeah, I'll go and buy a BMW. But, when you don't really need it, those kind of things. And same with, I'm the same as you. Mine was all about the personal development, spiritual growth. I'll be like, I need that course because that's going to help fix me. Oh, that didn't fix me. I need that course that will help fix me. And it's just this continuous cycle, but it was more from a point of desperation. It was, like you're saying, it's that discomfort. It's the, why is nothing fixing me? I need something to fix me. So I keep looking, and they keep coming up on my Facebook ads and my Instagram ads to tell me that I need more fixing. But, obviously there are times where you need to learn from someone, but it's that, like you said, it's that conscious, sovereign, powerful decision where you actually, for me, it's very much now, I need to have a full body yes to go ahead.
Right.
Otherwise it's a no-go. Sometimes I still fall in the trap because I'm still learning. I'm still learning about it. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, damn, I shouldn't have bought that. But most of the time I'm like, okay, I tell whoever I'm talking to, I need to feel a full body yes before I make a decision now, because I've been caught before. And then there's a lot of resentment because you pay so much money to a coach or whatever, and they either completely were not aligned with you, or they didn't deliver what they say they were going to deliver. Yeah. And it's, to kind of come full circle to what we were talking about before we hit record around like our sacred money work. Cause like the like cycle of spending in that way, that we've been talking about and that you were just sharing about is like only the first half of the story. And I think that knowing the second half of the story can be it can just give us such a deep
like forward drive to move beyond that consumerism cycle when we know why we're doing it at a deeper level, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the idea of our sacred money work, is that we don't have to relate to money in the way that society and our culture has, you know, the narrative that we've inherited about what our relationship with money ought to look like. And when we can rewrite it in a way that is like deeply meaningful to us, like, wait a second, money, I can use money as a tool to like build the world I want to live in, even on like the smallest scale, like, wait, what? Then that is like such a beautiful, like meaningful undercurrent in our relationship with money that it makes it so much easier to release the consumerism cycle, because it's like, this is not even a fun game anymore. Like the game of moving money towards the world I want to live in is like, it's apples and oranges. You know what I mean? It's like not even a fair comparison.
It's like you were saying before, is the sovereign, the conscious decision making versus the, you know, unconscious. And a lot of times we think we know what we want to build, but because then we're stuck in that consumerism cycle where we actually never build what we want to build. So the second part is really the values. What do you value? And working towards that and spending money in the way that aligns with your values. Is that, I remember like we were talking about this when we first met, and it was like, yes, you know, because a lot of times we don't spend money in the way that aligns with our values. Yeah. Do you mind talking a bit more, expanding a bit more about that part of the you know, the second part of it, where we can then drive, you know, our life forward using money as a tool?
Totally. Yeah. As you were talking about it, because like values is such an unsexy word that I think a lot of people are like, that doesn't sound fun, you know? But to me, it's kind of like the difference between like performative sex and real sex. You know, like performative sex being this thing where it's like, yeah, like, you know, okay, this is like, I don't get what the big hype is about, you know? It's like, okay, it's not that great, versus like real sex where it's not, you know, you're not staying at the surface level. It's way better, you know? Yeah. I know for most of my 20s, I was having performative sex. And then when I actually started having real sex, I was like, oh, that's why people like this. You know?
I love it.
So I bring that up just because, like, you know, values, I think a lot of times, like there's some weird funk in our collective around the idea of values that like, it comes with some shoulds, and like that you have to perfectly live up to these idealistic value sets and all this stuff, when really like the most effective thing and the most effective way that I've personally ever experienced values is as the things that already make me deeply joyful. You know what I mean? It's not these aspirational values where it's like, oh, I should be hardworking and I should be whatever, you know? It's more like, I love the world more and I enjoy the world more when I trust people. Yeah. You know, and like that, for example, that's one of the values of my business and my company is we choose to trust people with the full awareness that might get broken, but we enjoy the world more when we open with, in the words of Jim Collins, open with a bit of trust, right? Where it's like, I'm going to trust the world and the universe because it makes my life better when I do. And like, I enjoy life more when I do. So that kind of value set is like really fun to live into because it's like, yeah, this makes my life better because I genuinely enjoy it. So just to plop that out there, because I know the word values can oftentimes bring up some stuff for people where it's like, you know, this like should energy. Oh, now you have like this new to-do list of things that you should be living. Yeah. Instead of like, no. Like, I already enjoy these things. I would, if no one, you know, ever knew for the rest of time that I was like wandering around trusting the world, or wandering around leaning into the mystic path and like stepping out into the unknown, I would still be doing it because it's fun and I like life that way. Yeah. That's the kind of value set that's like the winning combination. And so working with money according to that, to keep up with the trust example, is very fulfilling and very rewarding, because if I'm going to, you know, assume that I trust the universe and like operate, or like assume that the universe is trustworthy, for example, then that's when I think about like, for example, tangible relationship of how that like, or tangible examples of how that shows up in my relationship with money. Then okay, great example. The other day I was pumping gas and someone came up to the pump and they were like, hey, I've got this whole like life situation going on and I really need like help to, you know, put some gas in my car to get here. Do you have a couple dollars? And I happen to have cash, which whoever has cash. Like, I just happen to have cash that day. And I was like, yeah, dude, here you go. And I think past versions of me would have been like, that sounds like a bullshit story. Like, I don't know. Like, I think you're just trying to swindle, But the living, you know, the practice of living into this value of trust made that an incredibly rewarding experience, because I'm like, why would homie lie to me about this? Like, he probably is in a tough spot. And like, I hope that cash helped him a fuck ton. I would help me a fuck ton of that situation. Yeah. And then it became a joyful exchange where it's like, I got to help a human who needed help, you know? So these kinds of like, yeah, just as a tangible example of like a really small and simple way that our values can, when we really embrace them, can change the way that we move money, and more importantly, the way that we feel about moving money in the world.
Yeah, I think the energy with giving and receiving is very important when you spend and receive money, because it's like, I guess it's like, you know, if someone has a divorce and, you know, you need to pay maintenance, right? It's that energy of like, I need to give money. And, you know, both parties are, you know, they're probably like maybe not on good terms. And then the receiving party is like, you know, he's not giving me enough, or, you know, or she's not giving me enough, whatever. And is that energy, and it doesn't really make money fun and happy, and you're not grateful for it. And then that energy kind of transpires to all your other money transactions, which then blocks the flow of money coming in. Yeah.
Well, I don't know that I would say it blocks the flow of money coming in, because at least I know in my own head, in my own brain, for a long time, I thought that there was some magical fairy who was gatekeeping all the money channels, you know, that was like, you're not feeling aligned in this particular money transaction, so I'm going to close this gate and close that gate and get your shit together, you know? Yeah. But what I think it is more like is that if we aren't enjoying, okay, here's a great metaphor. It's like, if I sit down at a restaurant and they serve me a dish and it's nasty and it's disgusting, and I'm like, this is fucking gross. It's giving me indigestion. It's already making me have to poop myself. Like, this is terrible. I'm not going to want to eat another bite. You know what I mean? I'm going to be like, yeah, no, I'm good. Take it back. Take it back to the kitchen. Bring me a salad. This is nasty. And that's kind of the energy, you know, it's not that it's not that the meal is delicious, but they're only bringing you one bite at a time. And you're like having to be on your best behavior so that they'll bring you another bite. It's like the meal is fucking gross. So we don't want to eat anymore. And that's kind of the same. That's like, you know, I would say a pretty good metaphor of the experience with money in that situation is like the experience of moving money feels icky. It feels nasty. We're not enjoying it in our system. And so on some level, we're deciding for our own best interest. Yeah, I don't want to do more of this because it sucks, right? Just like I don't want to eat I don't want to eat McDonald's because that sucks. Like, that does weird shit to my body. And so then I'm so glad you brought up that example because there's that is so common. And that is oftentimes one of the stickiest things for me. And it was taxes, like paying taxes. Cause I was like, I don't agree with how the government spends the money and like, like we shouldn't be putting so much money towards the military. We should, blah, 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 right. And so as someone who cares about moving money towards the world I want to see, that was a challenge because it's like, that's not the world I want to see. So, but it's those things that there's creative constraints again, right? Where it's like, no, but this is a thing that I must do, whether it's the divorce maintenance, whether it's taxes or whatever. So in those situations, it's much more about acknowledging it as a creative constraint, right? Where it's like, and when I keep using that phrase, but like, what I mean when I say that is creativity flourishes under constraint. So, for example, some of the most creative business models that I see today are like capitalism divergent business models that wouldn't have popped up without the creative constraint that is extractive capitalism. You know what I mean? Like that pressure to figure out a new and different way birthed a creative flourishing in new business models. So any of these things that feel dense and heavy when it comes to our money relationship, you can see them as creative constraints. They're there to help us birth a new flush of creativity in how we experience and relate to money. So I can't speak to, personally to the divorce experience, but I can speak to the tax experience where for me, that is symbolic of like me keeping my books in order and paying my taxes is symbolic of me nourishing myself. I'm not doing it like, and this goes back to intention and the energy behind it. I'm not doing it because I'm moving money towards the military. Like that's not the intention that money is coded with. I'm doing it to nourish the self. I'm doing it because when I am well-resourced and when my books are in order, my mind is in order. When the things are chaos, then there's inner turmoil. And I love myself enough to do those things, right? And so that money is being moved towards a world of self-love. And it's being, used as a tool to build a world where there's more self-love in a very tangible, literal sense, because as I do it, it's an act of self-love. And every single act of self-love that we do adds more self-love to the world, or every single act of self-care, every single act of authentic expression or personal empowerment or awakened feminine embodiment, like every single act is adding more of that to the world. So when it comes to like the divorce maintenance fees and divorce maintenance payments, it's like, okay, if this is a meal that tastes like shit, then what would I rather it be? How can this experience become something that is genuinely nourishing to me so that not even so that I can open up channels for more money, but so that I can be nourished and I can build, step by step and action by action, I can build a world where there's more, whatever it is, whether it's self-love or self-care or personal empowerment or, abundance and like trust in that, risk giving and receiving. There's like a trust there. Whatever it is that we want to see the world have more of, the Gandhi style, we can be that in terms of how we, what we decide moving that money is symbolic of for us.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think when, like you say, it is a ripple effect, because when you love yourself more, people are like, oh, I want what she's having or he's having. And then it kind of, expands and ripples out in that way. And in terms of the taxes, one of my mentors used to say, people always go, oh, I need to pay taxes. Oh, I need to pay taxes. And she used to tell us that, think of it as a privilege, because if you weren't doing well in your life, then you wouldn't be paying taxes. So like in some ways, like what you're saying is that, self-care, self-love, self-flourishing, because you're flourishing, you're able to do or, pay the tax and do all those things. So it's a really good way to put it and see it in a different light. So really, the second piece is going, okay, what do I love to do or enjoy or experience? And using money as a tool to create more of those experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And another big chunk that I often teach about when it comes to because I call this the sacred money work, right? Like, how are we using money as a tool to build the world that we want to build? Like you were just saying. Another part of the infrastructure of sacred money work, if you will, is also how volume of money, how much money is truly in this red hot moment, are we meant to be moving through, because there's so much, people can oftentimes struggle to give themselves permission to work with the volume of money that is their sacred money work across the entire spectrum, right? That there are some people, Charles Eisenstein is a brilliant human, and he actually teaches on this really cool gift economy model and sacred economic model. So if anyone's wants to geek out, check out his book, Sacred Economics. But I've heard interviews of him, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he interviews with one of his friends who lives completely outside of operates completely outside of a money economy and exclusively on gift economy. He grows all of his own food. People bring him the things that he needs to grow his food, and in exchange, he gifts them food. He has a place to stay in exchange for I think running the community garden or whatever, but his whole life is off the money grid. And that is I got the goosebumps. That's a sacred template that we as a collective need to be able to see, that is that abundance exists outside of money. You know what I mean? And he's doing his sacred money work, even though he's never touching money. Yeah. Because that is one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum is someone who is a conscious wealth builder, right? And is consciously accumulating wealth and holding wealth, not from the old, and this one is sticky for people oftentimes to wrap their brains around, because it's not an old model of wealth where it's I'm holding on to this for self-worth, or I'm holding on to this for security or anything else. But they can actually serve as a great example of this is Pilar Lesko, who's a money medicine woman. And she feels called to create a lot of conscious wealth for the sake of creating a template for everyone else to see that, you can create and move money in non-traditional ways that is deeply sacred, right? And then there's a whole, so that's kind of two ends of the spectrum. And then there's a whole slew of humans in between who, and in one chapter of life, we may be on the one end of the spectrum, and on another chapter of life, we could be on the total opposite end of the spectrum. But giving ourselves permission to be wherever it feels like we're being called to be on that spectrum is another big part of the sacred money work, because we can have all these stories about, like, for example, the conscious wealth building. There's like so many like wealth archetypes out in the world where it's like the abundant boss babe, or the rich witch, or like the hustle and grind 8-figure perfect 5 a.m. routine entrepreneur. You know what I mean?
That just sounds stressful.
Yeah. When I first started digging into my subconscious to like see all the wealth archetypes that I had in there, there was this super obscure and weird one that came out. I live in Virginia, and I live in like this, it's a small town, but it's beautiful. There's lots of vineyards. There's lots of like horse farm, like horse pastures and cow farms. And like, it's really gorgeous. But that there's this like wealth archetype that's specific to here, that their families had land for generations, and they are like a horse family, and they wear this like one specific, they all wear barber coats. So I had this like super specific wealth archetype in my brain, and I was like, I don't want to be that, you know? So, but anyway, all that's to say, we can have like this whole cast of characters in our brain around like what it means to be on any particular point in this spectrum. And it's super important, but not serious, but it's super important that we like clarify what stories we might have in our head about what it means to be someone who's building a lot of wealth, or what it means to be someone who's living completely outside the money economy, and release all that and give ourselves permission to be whoever we're being called to be on that spectrum.
I love that.
If that makes sense the way I said it.
Yeah, it makes sense, because like you said, we get programmed to think that, you know, earning $1 million is like the end goal, or $1 billion, or having that, you know, like you say, the 8-figure 5 a.m. hustle, you know, whatever it is. But knowing who you actually want to be and the money archetype that you want to be in. And I love that you mentioned the chapters, like in that chapter of your life is really the key, because I think my big thing with money is that when you have the relationship, when you have the right, I don't even know if right is the right, but when you have the right relationship with money for you, then you also have the right relationship with yourself. You know, you're in that state of flow, in that beingness where you are being who you are, because everything is aligned to what your soul wants, how you spend your money, how you are showing up in the world, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that changes, you know, in different chapters. So I just love how you brought that up. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. One thing I would expand on is you were saying, you know, who you would want to be in relationship with money. But I would say it's actually who you already are. And that, you know, if you feel called to, say, expand the volume of money that's working through your life, it's who you already are, just with more money, you know? Is like so clutch, because we're, each time we bop around on the spectrum of like money volume, and I hesitate to say like wealth spectrum, because the whole there's wealth everywhere. It's not like you're moving up in wealth or down in wealth, you know, like homie who runs the garden and lives off the money economy grid altogether is living a very wealthy life. Right. So, but like the money volume spectrum, if you feel called to move up towards, you know, so up in volume, then it's not that we're meant to become someone who's already there. It's that we're meant to take who we are and add that as a template for people, you know, where it's like, for example, who I am now is like, my shoes are always kind of dirty because I live on a farm. And I know that's like a super like random thing, but for the longest time I had it in my head that like, oh, rich Caroline has clean shoes.
I love that.
And it's like random stuff like that, that it's like, no. I'm meant to bring my dirty shoes wherever I go on the spectrum because I live on a fucking farm and this is my vibe. You know what I mean? And I'm always going to be romping around in the mud. So it's stuff like that we're like, oh, this part of me can't come to wherever it is I'm feeling called to go on the money volume spectrum. But that's the exact part that is supposed to go with you because that's what's not there yet and is needed, is like that package of who you are is exactly what's supposed to be just in a different spot on the spectrum.
Yeah, I get it now. Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool because when you think of someone rich, you always think they're immaculate and, wearing all the, brands, the luxury brands under the sun, but really it's being who you are and expanding that money volume, as you call it. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. And it's beautiful because that comes like full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning with consumerism is that idea of like, what money wealth looks like keeps us tapped into the consumerism where it's like, oh, I need to now pay to get my shoes shined.
Yes.
Or even though I don't care about that at the fuck all. Yes. Or I need to go get my nails done all the time, even though I also don't care about that at the fuck all, like all of these things that keeps us hooked into that like consumerism cycle, the idea of who we need to be, period.
Yeah. The way that we think we need to. Moment. Yeah. It is beautiful the way we think we need to look or act in a certain way. Yeah. Oh, this is such a great conversation, but I am looking at the time and we do need to wrap up, but I'll love to have you on to talk more about all of this. So Caroline, before we wrap up, can you share with us what's setting your soul on fire at the moment?
Good question. Well, in this red hot moment of this conversation, thanks for having me because this has been super fun. You asked lots of good questions that brought lots of cool stuff out. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And it's interesting in this red hot moment. And it might be, I was listening to an astrology report about what's going on in the sky in April. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Cause I'm feeling this pull inward to like just kind of reorganize like health and well-being life. Yeah. Which has been like super fun. And I haven't felt a pull this strong in that particular direction. I've always tinkered, but I haven't felt a pull that strong since probably like when I was in grad school. So like 2015, which was a moment of like vibrant up level in my life. All of a sudden I was like, oh, I can have this much energy. Cool. So I'm excited to see what comes of that because last time I felt this much, momentum in that direction. There's a nice little energy boost. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. And if people want to find out more about what you do and how they can work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, the website is the best place to go for all the things. So just carolineaddington.com. I am slowly moving away from the social medias as a consumerism experiment. So yeah, just carolineaddington.com. Depending on when this drops, I run a peaceful money course that kind of goes deeper into everything that we talked about. So if people want to go deeper down the rabbit hole and have that experience from a place of sovereignty, then they can definitely check that out. And whenever the doors are open, it'll be, if you sign up for like the email newsletter and stuff, like you'll stay in the loop. So
awesome. Thank you so much. I've had such a fun conversation with you today. And looking forward to another conversation with you Thank you so much.
This has been awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, virtual hug. Thank you.